Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to second this particular motion, Mr. Speaker. And from the onset, I would want to say that I'm quite surprised that I didn't know that Senator Cheriot, the leader of majority, has that in-depth knowledge on matters environment and climate change. I feel very challenged that he has understood the meat and crust of why we actually need to do this particular amendment. And as I second Mr. Speaker, I don't want to say, a lot of issues that I actually need to say have been said by my brother Senator Cheriot. But I want to answer a question that is being asked by most of my colleagues, and it has been a question to all the members of the Lands, Environment and Natural Resources Committee on why we actually need to change this law. Mr. Speaker, all of us keep mentioning and we base our argument, Article 42 of the Constitution, that every person has a right to a clean and healthy environment, Mr. Speaker. But then there is a process to it, Mr. Speaker. And where there have been some naysayers on the climate and environment space, Mr. Speaker, it is then apparent that all of us now agree that challenges that come with global warming are here with us, Mr. Speaker. Everywhere in the world, Mr. Speaker, our climate and climatic way of how we are used to has changed drastically, Mr. Speaker, from prolonged droughts, Mr. Speaker, to some places, Mr. Speaker, suffering from very serious droughts and famine, Mr. Speaker. And we, as the people of Kenya and the Kenyan government, Mr. Speaker, when we ratified the Paris Agreement, just as my brother Senator Aaron has mentioned, on December 26, 2016, Mr. Speaker, we set our target of carbon emissions to less than 2 degrees Celsius, or less than actually 1.5%, Mr. Speaker. But then, what Senator Cheriot has said, the challenge that we faced, and out of the 13 memoranda that we received as a committee, Mr. Speaker, they are speaking to this particular question: why do we need to do this bill? And the Minister for Environment, because this is a government-sponsored bill, when she appeared before us, that was a very pertinent question. Why do we need this bill? Why do we need to regulate the space about around carbon trading, Mr. Speaker? There is something that is very clear in the minds of everybody here, that even as we speak about carbon trading, there are 116 organizations that are dealing with carbon credit, Mr. Speaker. And just as Aaron Cheriot has rightfully said, actually the statistics of our share as Kenya in the African market of the carbon credit is 20%. We got 20% of everything that was paid in Africa from this carbon market, Mr. Speaker. But none of the people who are here, or very few of the people who are here, Mr. Speaker, have the clarity of how this money was paid, who was paid, and how they were paid, Mr. Speaker. Just yesterday, Mr. Speaker, we were seated here, and the senator for Machakos was asking the cabinet secretary, now that carbon harvesting is happening in Chulu, I think some place called Chulu in Machakos, Mr. Speaker, what was the space around how this money was paid, Mr. Speaker? The senator for Taita Taveta is here. He was asking how 120 million was paid to a ranch, and they were just told this is your share of the carbon credit. This is how we traded. This is the much we traded, but they do not know how much was paid. They were just given some blanket whatever. So when we speak about clarity, Mr. Speaker, you will be surprised today that there is a company that is running in Siaya, and they are doing carbon credit on behalf of the people of Siaya, and not even the leadership of Siaya knows, or even the leadership of Nyandarua, or the members of Parliament who are in this Senate, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, that the highest payment was made to Kwale County, Mr. Speaker. The senator for Kwale is a member of my committee, Mr. Speaker. He does not understand how, these companies around Shimba Hills traded on behalf of the people of Kwale. How the money that we got as Kenya, the 15 billion, how it was distributed amongst the communities, Mr. Speaker. So, when we speak up to ensuring that we regulate this space about carbon credit, we want to have a clarity of how this trade is happening. Mr. Speaker, again, there's an issue about integrity and transparency, Mr. Speaker, and where government has a responsibility under Article 69 of protecting communities, Mr. Speaker, then they cannot protect communities without a framework. They cannot protect communities without the tools of trade, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, because we are not operating in isolation, Mr. Speaker, we then have to align to international commitments, Mr. Speaker. Because Senator Cheriot has rightly put it, Mr. Speaker. Are we the one that caused this problem, Mr. Speaker? No. There are other peoples that have greatly contributed to the global warming that we are facing as a country, Mr. Speaker. And 186 countries have committed to the Paris Agreement, Mr. Speaker. But then, are we getting the rightful share of what we are supposed to do so that we ensure we manage this crisis? No, Mr. Speaker. Why? Because we do not have the right framework, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, again, why we actually need this amendment is to ensure that we engage a broader range of stakeholders. Just as I have said, stakeholders are from different. Just yesterday, Mr. Speaker, we were saying that such a stakeholder has written a memoranda. We are this company that trades this place. Nowhere nobody in the ministry knows that they are operating under what space, Mr. Speaker. Nobody in government knows they are operating under what space, Mr. Speaker. Nobody in the local community knows where they are operating under what space, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, this is something that will be addressed by this bill, Mr. Speaker. Another point, Mr. Speaker, that I want to raise is that we need to support Kenya's emission reduction goals, Mr. Speaker. Now that we have placed it at 1.5%, Mr. Speaker, we then have to get a framework of how we are getting there, Mr. Speaker. Not somebody doing it in their corner there, another person doing it in their corner there, another person doing it in their corner there. We have to get a legal framework around which then we shall be able to achieve these particular goals of the reduction of emissions, Mr. Speaker. So finally, Mr. Speaker, because I also want to allow my other colleagues who are here, there is something that has been mentioned about the objects that will come, and we really had pressed the Cabinet Secretary yesterday when she appeared before our committee, Mr. Speaker, on then how communities will benefit from this, so that then government does not become a prohibitor in this kind of, in this market, Mr. Speaker. And I would also want to agree with the Senator General, because how these monies will be shared, Mr. Speaker, will then come in the regulations that will come. I would want to ask my brothers again in the Delegated Legislation Committee, Mr. Speaker, to then step up on behalf of the communities, Mr. Speaker, so that the communities can be able to benefit as they should in as far as these particular earnings are concerned, Mr. Speaker. So, without saying so much, Mr. Speaker, allow me to end it there. I ask my colleagues, Mr. Speaker, even as we say that this bill has been rushed, Mr. Speaker, you know, as a country, we are honored to host the whole continent next week, Mr. Speaker. And when we pass, and if we pass this bill, and I beg and I seek the indulgence of my colleagues that we pass this bill, Mr. Speaker, we shall become, I think, the second country in the whole continent, Mr. Speaker, and then we shall be leading from the front, Mr. Speaker. You know, our president chairs the African Working Group on Environment, Mr. Speaker. And it is out of this honor, Mr. Speaker, that we are hosting the summit here, Mr. Speaker. Kenya is a powerhouse, Mr. Speaker, and that is how we control the biggest space around carbon trading in the last financial year, Mr. Speaker, controlling over 20% of what was given in the whole of this continent, Mr. Speaker. So I urge my colleagues that let us lead from the front. When the other countries come to this country, Mr. Speaker, let us take pride that we have shown the way, we have led by the front, and we have an existing legislation in this regard, Mr. Speaker. With those very many remarks, Mr. Speaker, allow me to second.